Welcome back to another episode of Sean and Ed's Do Baseball.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Ed's.
And we are bringing you baseball history.
That's right, we're a bi-weekly baseball history podcast where the story catcher doesn't know what the story pitcher is going to be on the mound throwing them.
And I am hoping I got my good stuff today, Edsy.
You usually got some good stuff.
Yeah, well, this
You're consistent. You're a consistent guy. Consistent veteran at this point.
There we go. Just a solid number 4.
3 to 4.
3 to 4. Well, this
can
one
have an ace appearance every once in a while.
Yeah, every once in a while. Solid, but
we're not here to analyze ourselves.
Yeah, we're not. You can analyze us by following us on the internet at Doing Baseball on Twitter or at Doing.Baseball on Instagram and TikTok. I myself, Sean, am at Sean Do Baseball on Twitter.
And I myself, am at Eds Do Baseball on Twitter.
Yes.
Not X.com.
Not X.com. Twitter, everybody. Find us there. Also, wherever you're finding us, please give us a review, rating, comments, whatever you want to give us. If you have story ideas, we love to hear them. We love doing this. We're coming up on our 100th show to end this season. I believe we're at 94 today?
93.
93. Either way, great number for Toronto baseball fans.
Yeah, it is.
It is. Before we get started, we will thank our sponsor, Two Loons Brewing. Two Loons Brewing, absolutely amazing. Their IPAs on the shelves.
Delicious.
At LCBOs. Good old beers. Beers are great. Check them out if you go to Two Loons Brewing or twoloonsbrewing.com and look for them at the menu on your local craft beer bar and all of that. And they got a lot of great stuff on the way.
And of course, please be of legal drinking age and enjoy responsibly.
Absolutely.
You don't want to get carried away.
I'm enjoying a Two Loons right now.
Yes, you are.
All right, so are we good? We got through all the stuff?
I think we did the stuff.
We did the stuff.
I'm ready to do some more stuff. I'm ready to do some baseball.
All right, let's do some baseball. And Edsy, a little bit inspired by your non-biography story of last week, I decided to, or last week, a couple weeks back, and also thank you, Blake Murphy, for joining us.
Thanks again, Blake.
So we are going to be talking about August 8th, 1903, which, for those of you who don't know, is the day we are recording on August 8th, 2023. So we are talking 120-year anniversary today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, interesting.
So our story begins in Philadelphia on August 8th, 1903.
As many baseball stories back in these days do.
Absolutely. Today specifically is a anniversary, Edsy, that I'm sure you're unaware of. But August 8th is the deadliest day in baseball history.
Okay. That's all right. I don't know what that really is going to entail, but obviously death.
Obviously death. So we start with 13-year-old Maggie Berry, who was asked by her aunt to run an errand. The errand would take her past National League Park, which is other names, I think it's the Baker Bowl, where the Phillies were playing the second game of a doubleheader against the Boston Beaneaters, now known as the Atlanta Braves.
Mm-hmm.
The first game had been a fantastic affair requiring extra innings. Boston's Vic Willis threw a 12-inning complete game and had just enough in the tank to hold off a last-gasp rally from the home team in the bottom of the 12th. And the Beaneaters edged the Phillies 5-4.
Okay. Sounds like quite a game.
It was a great game, just a regular day at the park. Mm-hmm. Game 2 was just as intense as the first game and was tied 5-5 in the fourth inning. But the game would not be completed. Around 5:30, Maggie would run into some friends outside the stadium, and by 5:45, 12 people would be dead and over 230 injured.
What? 12 people?
12 people.
Okay. That's fuck.
Yeah.
Something bad's happening, obviously.
So 1903, the Phillies were not a good team. And in fact, on August 8th, 1903, they had a 31-61 record.
Ooh. Yeah, okay, they really weren't good.
Yeah, so even though the product on the field is not that great, the stadium that hosted them was known as the best stadium in baseball. In 1883, Philadelphia was awarded National League franchise and quickly outgrew their first home at Recreation Park, which housed just 6,500 fans.
Yeah, okay. It's not very much.
Yeah, so fans were turning up in droves, and they were like, we can't seat you, and things were getting dangerous. Just
crowding out behind the bleachers, probably.
Yeah, so they decided, more importantly, Alfred J. Reach, who owned the Phillies, he decided to build...
The Reach Guide guy.
Reach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Writer of the Reach Guide.
The Reach Guide.
I think, yeah.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Decided to build a larger, more grandiose home for the ball club for the 1887 season. So they get the National League franchise. It gets way too hype. They build another ballpark. Philadelphia Baseball Park was considered the finest ballpark in the nation when it opened in 1887. Reach had doubled the capacity, allowing 12,500 fans, and a lot of the structure used brick instead of the hastily constructed wood structures common at the time.
Okay.
So this is from Rich Westcott in his book for essay Philadelphia Old Baseball Parks. The massive brick pavilion at the main entrance, dominated on the outside by a central turret 165 feet high and two end turrets 75 feet high, was as revolutionary in ballpark construction as it was in medieval appearance. The double-decked grandstand between first and third bases held 5,000 seats, while 7,500 additional customers could be accommodated in the bleachers that extended down the left and right field lines. There were no seats in the outfield.
Okay.
So they
got like, what's that, 13,000 approximately?
Yeah, basically about that.
Sounds like a beautiful stadium, though.
Beautiful stadium for the time, especially.
And this is the Baker Bowl?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
So still, even with all of the modern amenities, the ballpark did have a considerable amount of wood. And on the morning of August 6th, 1894, so about 9 years before what we were talking about, as the Phillies were preparing for an afternoon game, one of the players noticed a fire smoke coming from the wooden grandstands.
Oh, shit.
So the fire spreads, ballpark...
burns everything down.
Whoa, but remember
Except for the bricks.
Yeah, the guts of it are kind of there. So there's no fatalities. The cause of the fire was never really 100% determined. But the Phillies were... and the Phillies were forced to play games at University Field while the bleachers were being rebuilt. So fires were a real issue for baseball stadiums at the time.
Real issue for cities in general at the time, I think.
Fire
Every city's got a great fire story.
Yeah, absolutely. When there's a great fire in 90% of cities during this time, it is. It's the time of wood structures.
Yeah.
So
and heating your house with fire.
Yeah, exactly. Just get these oil lamps next to this old dry wood.
Yeah.
A number of baseball stadiums had burnt down. White Sox had lost virtually everything in a fire in the 1870s, causing the team to fall out of first place. Like, they lost all their equipment and stuff, too. Over the coming years, many old wooden stadiums would one by one burn down, including Cincinnati Stadium and the Polo Grounds in New York. So, with this in mind, Alfred J. Reach decides that this time around he's going to build a fireproof stadium.
Okay, famous last words.
So he pays $225,000 to rebuild the stadium, and he uses mainly steel and brick, with wood only being used for the flooring and some of the bleachers that fans sit on.
Okay, smart.
Yeah. So, once again, this is from Lost Ballparks book. It was the first ballpark to feature cantilever construction, a radical new architectural technique in ballpark design. Using cantilevered concrete supports and iron girdles, architects could eliminate most of the columns supporting the upper deck and roof that made for so much obstructed view seating. A cantilever is a beam supported only on one end. The beam carries the load to support where it is resisted by moment and shear stress. Cantilever construction allows for overhanging structure without external bracing. I could have just said it with that one last sentence.
Yeah, I was gonna. Yeah,
instead of
I was gonna summarize it after you got through all that, but you did it yourself. Quick aside: 225,000 in 1903 is about $7.8 million.
Well, that was in 1895, but
1895.
Still, that's not a big difference. I would assume.
Right.
So they build this new fantastic ballpark. So the newly constructed ballpark opened in 1895 with the seating now for 18,800 people, and many saw the ballpark's construction as a defining moment for the future of baseball stadiums.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it would.
Reach spoke proudly of his new ballpark, christened National League Stadium, but would colloquially be known as the Baker Bowl. The new structure, this is Reach's quote, "The new structure is mainly of brick and steel containing no wood or other flammable materials except the platform and seats." So he's touting all this, but I love it's just like, there's no wood except where you sit and stand.
Yeah. Except where you are.
Except where you are.
Yeah.
Just
it may burn, including you, but the stadium.
Everything else will be fine.
Yeah.
So you probably think I'm teasing a bit about the fire kind of angle on this, but Reach was right. The stadium did its job. It was not a fire trap like so many others at the time.
Yeah.
Reach would not maintain his ownership of the Phillies for long, though. Reach and his partner, John Rogers, who you're going to hear a lot about, sold the team for $170,000 following the 1902 season to a group of 24 rich businessmen from Philadelphia and Cincinnati who together formed the Philadelphia Baseball and Entertainment Company. So you'll also notice that, he sold the team for less than he paid for the stadium.
Mm-hmm.
But in this agreement, he actually still owned the property and they just leased the stadium and everything. So he's actually making money off this, which is very important as we move forward.
Okay.
So he's
smart of him.
Him and Rogers own the land and are getting a lease. So as I say, it's not like they just paid $220 and then just sold the team for $170 and took the loss.
Right. So they got some value for, the money, the liquid money they gave up.
Well, and I think they signed the ownership group, the Philadelphia Baseball and Entertainment Company, signed like a 13-year lease to start.
Okay.
So there were no incidents for years, but as you can guess, as we go back to that day, August 8th, 1903, that was all about to change. So the stadium overlooked 15th Street and Lehigh, and that is where we return to 13-year-old Maggie Berry and her friends. So the teenagers, they're 13, 14, whatever group these school children are, they were most likely bored and hanging out just outside the stadium was a place to be. There's
a lot going on.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing else to do.
There's treats and there's hot dogs and popcorn and everything around. And
they're bored. They're probably showing off to each other. So two really drunk guys are making their way down 15th Street, visibly drunk,
stumbling around.
Yeah, and it's
not a good start.
It caught the attention of the kids, right?
Okay.
And a cohort of young teens begin following the two drunks and chirping them, making fun of them, and throwing pebbles at them and stuff because they're all shit faced and can't do anything.
Doesn't seem like a good idea, though.
No. So as the men tried to make their way, the teenagers relentlessly teased and harassed the two drunks. One finally had enough and turned and grabbed one of the children by the hair. It was Maggie Berry.
Oh.
So Maggie is being dragged by this drunk guy by the hair. She's been screaming and shrieking.
Yeah.
And her friends join in the commotion, screaming for the man to let her go and screaming for help. And then someone was screaming literally like, murder, murder.
Screaming bloody murder.
Literally bloody murder.
Yes.
Game 2 was in the 4th inning and tied 5-5.
I was wondering.
With 2 outs and the Beaneaters' Joe Stanley at the plate, Stanley was in the midst of a very short career that would most likely have been forgotten had he not been at the dish that day. As he got ready to hit, it became clear the crowd along one side of the stadium, like the 15th Street side, were no longer cheering, but clamoring to see what was taking place outside of the stadium.
Okay, so she's I mean, there's no, like, speakers in the stadium or anything, so, like, you know, this can be heard.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, according to the newspaper accounts at the time, an estimated 300 people jammed onto the balcony, the 8-foot balcony, which protruded about 3 feet over the street to witness the incident unfolding 3 stories below. And now I'll just go to the Philadelphia Inquirer for what happened next. And I quote, and I burp, and I quote, "Suddenly, jammed with an immense vibrating weight, the balcony tore itself loose from the wall. The crowd was hurled headlong to the pavement. Those who felt themselves falling grasped those behind, and they in turn held on to others. Behind were thousands still pushing up to see what was happening. In the twinkling of an eye, the street was piled 4 deep with bleeding, injured, shrieking humanity struggling amid the piles of debris."
Jesus Christ. So the whole thing collapsed because everybody was, like...
trying to, like, lean over and see. And there was
so much weight in the one area?
Yeah.
Wow, that was not built well.
No, oh, buddy. There's a long podcast left.
Okay. Just getting started.
As we know, like, yeah. As the headline of this is 200 hurt, 3 dead. But now we know it was much more, right? As I said. So the street was littered with injured, bloody bodies, and more kept falling as the crowd continued to press upward to see what was happening. So, right, it's just like the crowd is trying to all get up to see what's happening. It collapses, but they're still pushing because they can't. They're below. They can't.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's
pandemonium.
A waterfall of people falling off. And actually, I have a little bit of a visual for you here if you want to kind of see.
Oh, this is a newspaper drawing.
A newspaper drawing.
Let me see that again.
There you go.
Jesus, what a drawing!
I know. It's pretty graphic. We'll put it on there. So, yeah. A police officer told the Philadelphia Inquirer, "There must have been 100 men and boys, and every one of them was covered with blood. Some of them had their clothing almost torn from their bodies, while others were so bespattered with blood and mud as to almost be unrecognizable. Under the debris were the forms of those who were unconscious. You could not tell whether they were dead or alive. Timber, rubbish, and bricks were just piled everywhere."
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So,
that sounds awful.
Yeah. So this is one thing I could not find stuff on. I was literally Googling it all day today, just trying to find. One of the dead is Phillies mascot Sam Kelly, who just happened to be standing below when the stadium section collapsed. And I couldn't figure out, I mean,
it sucks for everybody, but, like, he could have been anywhere in the stadium.
And I don't know who this Sam Kelly Philadelphia mascot is. I still can't find anything about him. Obviously, if you Google Philadelphia mascot, you get a whole bunch of other shit.
Yeah.
But either way, if anybody knows about this Philadelphia mascot, let us know. But things are, like, really bad, as you can tell. And there were generally 3 reactions by people when something like this happens. Not just then, but just generally. So a majority of people that witnessed what just happened stood gawking in shock at the dreadful scene and basically offered no help, at least to start, right? They were just like, what the fuck?
What just happened? Yeah.
So another group, however, rushes forward. Some to help, but others, in a few cases, to snatch the pocketbooks or jewelry off some of them.
Christ.
There's some people that are
just
like,
here's my chance.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah. So there's, people are like, I gotta help. And then some people are like, oh, that's a nice ring.
I mean, not to, like, disparage the good people of Philadelphia. But, like, Philadelphia fans have a bad reputation.
And it starts here.
It starts early, apparently.
Yeah. But as Mr. Rogers told us, Fred Rogers, the great PBS Mr. Rogers, always look for the helpers. And there were lots of helpers to be found.
Okay, well, that's good.
The locals who lived nearby sprung into action and offered their homes as, triage stations and hospitals, I guess, until they could be transported to the real hospital. Mm-hmm. The scale of the disaster was beyond what the first responders on scene could handle, and they had to take immediate action alongside some of the public that was just helping to save as many lives as possible.
Sounds like a war zone.
Yeah, so carriages are commandeered, trolley trains are like force passengers off, and they're just like, no, we're an ambulance now.
Yeah.
You're taking these people to the hospital. And both Samaritan Hospital and St. Luke's Hospital, which were the two closest hospitals to the field, were soon just overwhelmed. As I say, we got over 200 people injured. Right? It is just not something that a hospital, even today, would be used to just having show up at your door.
You can't, yeah.
So, Eds, at this point, the game stopped.
Yeah, I guess so.
And the crowd in the rest of the stadium is now realizing what happened. And instead of running up trying to see what happened which caused it, now things turn and fans just begin to rush the field.
Okay.
Why? Because they're scared that the stadium is going to collapse, right? They realize, holy shit, a chunk of the stadium's missing.
Fair enough, yeah.
So
the structural integrity has been compromised.
Yeah. So the field is just full of fans that are absolutely terrified. The players don't really know what's happening. Some of them grab bats and they're just sitting there in a position like they're going to hit somebody because they're scared too.
Yeah.
This is from the Sporting Life. So this is basically gives you an idea of what it was like. The sound of breaking timbers and the cry of those caught in the fall gave rise to a belief that the whole of the stand was about to fall. With wild cries of fear, the crowd rose and made a rush for the field. They clambered over the seats and over one another, screaming, swearing, striking, and fighting for precedence in the mad rush for safety. They tore at one another's clothing and behaved like insane men.
Wow. What a scene this must have been. Like I said, it sounds like a war zone.
Yeah, and it's like a riot at this point.
Yeah.
People are hurt. No doubt some people get hurt in the rush.
Everybody in the stadium is going for
I'm sure it's much more localized and then kind of grows as people, there's that herd mentality. When you see other people panicking, you panic.
Well, let's get out of here. Yeah.
So inside things are not good, but outside things are, of course, really bad. At this point, it's clear about a 150-foot section along the top of the stadium had collapsed along 15th Street. And as in the end, 12 fans would be dead and 232 would be injured to varying degrees.
Fuck, that's insane.
So from the Philadelphia Inquirer the day after. It was customary during the era for people, adults and children, to wear hats to baseball games, and over 100 hats were gathered from the debris and placed in the window of a grocery store on 15th Street, waiting for their owners to reclaim them. So it's just a sad...
That is, yeah.
Sad. I mean, most of the hats would have been reclaimed. Only 12 people died, but still, you'd think, just see the hats get slowly picked up, or, it's just, yeah. It's
a weird, morbid thing.
Yeah. Yeah, but they're trying to just...
I mean, it's a nice... Yeah, I guess it's a nice thought, but...
Yeah, so, and now is when we get really into the weird shit. So in a stunning move that no authorities at the scene stopped, once victims were removed, the cleanup began almost immediately, with park employees clearing the debris within hours. Which, if you're an investigator...
Hours?
Yeah, if you're an investigator, that's not good.
No.
So, in fact, 2 days later, a city coroner requested that no debris be removed from the site so it could be examined as part of the investigation. But by that point...
It was all gone.
It was... most of it. You'll see. Luckily, a building inspector named John H. Kessler arrived on the scene. It was his area. Yeah. And he secured pieces of the joists and specimens of brick and mortar, which he took to City Hall to be placed into evidence. Mm-hmm. The club president, Potter, was vacationing in Saratoga, New York, so the main man in charge that day was Phillies business manager William Schatzline. In the immediate aftermath, according to the Philadelphia Inquirer, he was so badly prostrated by the shock that he could scarcely tell a coherent story.
Okay.
So, not the best man to be in charge of a disaster.
No.
So the next day, the team would release a statement saying the accident was in no way due to any lack of proper precautions or neglect on part of officials of the club. And the pavilion and stands were in perfect condition and for the purposes intended were safe and reliable. But the simultaneous rush of several hundred persons to a concentrated point weakened the structure and precipitated several hundred unfortunate persons crashing to the street below.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess they're saying they didn't break the regulation, but I think we can all agree that...
You'll see.
Did they break a regulation?
Oh, you'll see.
Okay.
So Potter quickly returned and was accompanied by National League President Harry Pulliam. Potter appeared before the press on August 10th and said basically the same thing. The accident was tragic, but it was not the fault of the Philadelphia Phillies. This didn't necessarily work, as the Philadelphia Inquirer's headline on August 11th read, "Rotten beams caused crash," says the mayor.
Oh, so the mayor's throwing accusations out there.
That's right.
Okay.
So Philadelphia Mayor John
Rotting
Weaver...
beams.
Pardon?
Rotting beams.
You'll see. Philadelphia's Mayor John Weaver visited the site of the tragedy and opined to the press, "I am not a builder, but it looks to me as if the construction of the balcony was faulty." He also complained about not having enough building inspectors and saying building inspectors were under no obligation to inspect buildings except theaters after they had been completed unless some complaint was made.
What? Building inspectors were only to inspect theaters?
Well, I think he said after it was built. So he's they were here for the construction, but they haven't come back since.
Okay. I thought it was all made of steel. This whole thing.
Well, remember the floorboards and stuff are
okay.
Where people walk are wood.
Right. Okay. So that's all collapsed and they've all fallen through.
That's the part.
I got you.
But as a remember, the Philadelphia Baseball and Entertainment Company didn't own the stadium per se. They just leased it. So Reach and his partner, Colonel John Rogers, still owned the building and the land that it sat upon, right? So they both also returned hastily after the incident. Rogers released a lengthy statement to the press talking about the maintenance and construction of the stadium, as well as saying the new club owners who took possession on March 1st followed, as Mr. Schultzline informs me, the same rule last spring and spent a large sum of maintenance and repair before their opening game. One thing is certain, that the mad rush of an excited crowd suddenly jumping to the balcony and pushing everything irresistibly before it would have crushed any similar structure, no matter how strongly or recently built. It was a football center rush multiplied infinitely that few, if any, walls could have withstood.
Okay. I disagree.
Oh, and
you should be able to build a building that that can withstand in the stadium you could be argued that if everyone in the stadium was standing in one corner, you could expect some partial collapse or something. But a building itself, you should be able to have everyone hiding in one corner and it not fall the fuck down.
Yeah, exactly. So. And you're going to see that some of that's bullshit just based on testimony coming up in the future.
Okay.
But there was an issue as even the day after, August 9th, the Philadelphia Inquirer reported a cursory glance at the debris before its removal by the ballpark employees showed that much of the timber was in a badly decayed state. While the main body of the wall looked firm, the bricks about the top where the joist protruded were loose, and some of them looked as though the mortar had been worn or washed away.
Oh, that doesn't sound good at all.
Yep. So August 10th, 2 days after the incident, the first lawsuit is filed.
Okay.
So, attorney John R.K. Scott, counsel for Walter Mariner and Harry Quigley, two of the men injured in the collapse, file suit against the Philadelphia Baseball Club and Exhibition Company to receive damages for injuries sustained. It was alleged in statements of claim that the defendant company was negligent in maintaining the overhanging promenade in a condition which was unsafe for patrons of the ballpark. So, as you can guess, that is not the only lawsuit. Eventually, 80 lawsuits, over 80 lawsuits are filed.
Okay.
Seeking damages of over $1 million collectively. So,
Thought it'd be more.
Yes.
But that's still a lot.
That's a lot, right? So, coroner Thomas Duggan, who had been like, well, they shouldn't remove any of that stuff, and they were like, well, we already did. He held an inquest into the incident, which started on August 18th. And this is where a lot of this testimony comes from, because the coroner's inquest sometimes can, you'll see, do better than the courts. Numerous people were summoned to testify in front of a 6-member jury, all of whom were professional builders. So the jury...
It's already biased one way?
No, not necessarily. They know their stuff.
Okay.
They're all experts in building, so they can determine whether they fucked up or not.
Right, okay.
So...
I got where you're going.
R.C. Ballinger, whose company had erected the balcony and the bleachers at the ballpark, he said the balcony had been constructed only to accommodate those fans passing to and from the bleachers. Ballinger noted that the supporting joints were built of the best yellow pine lumber with an average life of 7 to 9 years. But it was not intended to withstand a mob, and said, I can't see where anyone has any reason to blame anyone but himself. If an accident of the sort had happened while they were seated, they might have complained. So he's like, why are you complaining? Like, if it collapsed
They
when you
all
sat...
just ran over the... Yeah, if it collapsed just under normal circumstances.
Yeah.
I got you.
So... all of these guys testify. There's guys from the Phillies testifying, there's the builders testifying, and there's the property owners testifying. So Colonel Rogers, of course, claimed that there was nothing wrong with any of the timber, something he had apparently said before, according to the testimony of James Potter. Potter said that when his corporation took over the Phillies in February 1903, Colonel Rogers assured him that the stands were the strongest and safest in the world. Rogers would later dispute this testimony by Potter. He did testify that if asked before the accident if the stands were safe, he would have answered, to the effect that to the best of my knowledge and belief, the stands were sound and safe.
It doesn't sound like you're that sure of it.
Yeah.
And the fact that, like, I feel like when you boast that they're the safest in the world, it's like a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah, and you're like, well, if somebody
This ship's unsinkable.
If somebody had asked you before this happened whether it was safe, would you have said yes? Yeah, probably. To the best of my knowledge, sure.
Yeah.
You'll see, it gets a little more ridiculous. So Edward Clark, Edward Clark, an engineer of the Bureau of Building Inspection, disagreed with Rogers. He had examined the accident scene and found 50 of the wooden support joists in the area where the balcony had collapsed were rotten and worthless.
Oh, 50.
Yeah. 10 were 75% bad, 14 were 50% bad. Only 2 joists were in good condition. He claimed that hammering tin coverings on the wood caused holes for condensation and precipitation to get in and build up and cause rot. This opinion was held by the mayor as well as by other witnesses who displayed rusty nails and degraded tin.
Jesus Christ.
So this Ballinger dude, when he was building it, told Rogers apparently that, like, oh, we're just going to put tin on the wood and it protects the wood from rotting. Mm-hmm. And Rogers was like, it's invincible, everybody.
Yeah.
Not knowing that
it just creates condensation in there, and it's in fact much worse.
Yeah.
Than if you just left it exposed.
And here's the part that's even worse is this Edward Clark guy, the building inspector, engineer guy, he also claims that the lumber used for the joist was hemlock, not pine, disputing what Ballinger had said. So this is very serious because it means essentially...
It's softer?
Yeah, it's inferior wood.
Okay, yes.
Had been used in the ballpark's construction, But this was never investigated further, right? And you don't know whether it was the builders that did it, maybe it was the owners that did it, maybe it was something done to just like cut costs of the building and stuff like that, but it's never really investigated further, which you'd think people would want to like figure out, wait, why is the builder saying it was pine when it was hemlock, right? So, weird. Now to get to my absolute favorite part of the entire testimony.
Okay.
This is taken directly from Ed Morton on phillysaber.com. And I quote, Joseph Schroeder, groundskeeper, 1895 to 1902, was a landscaper. He described making thorough inspection of the timbers when the walkways was replaced in 1990 by sounding them with a sledgehammer and by use of an ice pick. He was followed by Sam Payne, who succeeded Schroeder as groundskeeper. Payne was a former contractor who had built houses for Rogers' real estate interest. He describes sounding the support timbers by thumping the floor with a crowbar in the spring of 1903. The jurymen shook their heads at this description. He's like, I hit him with a crowbar. It seemed fine.
They made the right sound.
Yeah.
I tested them by damaging them.
That's what the old guy, he'd used an ice pick. But I used a crowbar.
I didn't stab them like the old guy.
Yeah. I just hit him real hard. Hey, so the jury's like, what the fuck is going on?
You guys know what I'm talking about. You guys know what a good board sounds like when you hit it with a crowbar, right?
Gives you that pump. So the jury's like, fuck, okay. So the next day the jury stopped hearing from everybody trying to cast blame or hide blame, and instead heard from the victims, including Maggie Berry, who survived.
Thank God.
Yeah. So it was a very bleak day as the victims relived their trauma. And with that, after that, the inquest came to an end. But as the hearing came to a close, Ballinger, the builder guy, rose from his seat and requested the privilege of adding to his testimony. Permission was granted, and Ballinger started by stating that he, and I quote, distinctively told Colonel Rogers that all of them should be inspected thoroughly every year.
Okay.
Just they're like, okay, we're done. We'll go adjourn and we'll come back with a verdict. He's like, no, I told him to be safer.
I said check it every year. Not never.
Yeah. So, the coroner's inquest.
That's to check the steel-wrapped wooden beams.
Tin
yes. Wrapped.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So, remember, this is the coroner's inquest. It's not like a court, but the jury comes back with an absolutely excoriating verdict. The jury finds the failing of a balcony on the left field stand on 15th Street, which caused the deaths of Joseph Edgar and 11 others at Philadelphia Baseball Park, was due to rotten condition of supporting timbers. We further find that the Philadelphia Baseball Club Limited, as well as Rogers and Reach, were responsible for not having a thorough examination made of those timbers throughout the time of their ownership, and in stating at the time of the transfer that the buildings on the grounds were in first-class condition. So they're like...
Okay. So they're like, those guys lied.
And
they're responsible.
Yeah. They also recommended expanded powers for city building inspectors. And we're like, yeah, we ain't building shit with hemlock anymore, guys.
Yeah, I guess not.
So, after that, Colonel Rogers, like, there's no consequences to this. This is just, like, the finding, right?
Yeah.
So after that, Colonel Rogers begins attacking the others in the press and basically trying to pass the buck. He disputed Potter's recollection of their conversations, and Ballinger testimony right at the end being like, I told him. He's like, no, you didn't. Shut up. And he uses the press to, like, do this.
Yeah.
So he also claimed that Ballinger had promised him the wood would last years longer. So he's essentially just...
He's trying to throw the builder under the bus. And basically, kind of what you were alluding to earlier, what may have happened is, he gave him so much money, and then he bought cheaper wood.
Yeah. So the groups...
But who knows if that happened?
Who knows? Because they never investigated.
Yeah.
So the group's lawyers continued to maintain that the structure was sound and would have lasted years longer without repair if not for the rush of people. Therefore, the team and the stadium owners should not be held responsible in a court of law. The biggest problem with that, well, my biggest problem with that, is that many of the victims claim to not be in the rush, but either innocently leaving or just got caught up in the mob, or as
just fell into the gaping hole that as the stadium collapsed.
Yeah, and it's like some people were grabbing onto people trying to not fall in the hole and drag them down. Like,
right.
There is so many things that happened that day that innocent people could have got caught up with. Just passing all the blame to the people is, in my opinion, wrong. Mm-hmm. And as we talked about, some of the people were on the street below that got killed.
Yeah.
And this unfortunate thing, Edsy, is the Supreme Court of the USA would agree with Philadelphia Phillies lawyers. Mm-hmm. 6 years.
Well, I'm not surprised.
6 years after the catastrophe and all the lawsuits filed by the victims, they went all the way to the Supreme Court. And unfortunately for the victims, the court ruled that an extraordinary number of fans had congregated at the location where many of them should not have been, and consequently that neither the ball club nor the ballpark's landlords should be held responsible for the accident.
It like makes you sick, but like once again, based on one of our early episodes on like the deaths in baseball and stuff, I'm not surprised at all.
No,
that the side of the owners and the landlords was taken.
I mean, like, but in this case, there's like clearly. Like the coroner's inquest,
clear negligence on their part completely. Like, I mean, once again, as I was saying earlier, they I guess technically didn't break any regulations, but you know the regulations obviously weren't strong enough. Yeah, and also just like, you know, God forbid you build a building that's strong enough to hold everybody like hold everybody in an emergency situation.
Yeah, like if you're having a big party and you have 40 people on your second floor and it collapses, well, maybe you shouldn't have been having that party. But also, normally there's not 40 people in your house, but your floor shouldn't collapse either.
Yes,
that
would be a builder's responsibility.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, I mean, in the end, the Supreme Court just completely, even though the coroner's inquest was like, yeah, you guys are at fault. Mm-hmm. There's no real, like, everybody loses money on this except for lawyers, basically.
Yes.
Basically, you know, the you'll see the team. So back to the baseball. The Phillies would attempt to restart games at the ballpark just 2 days after the accident.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
You just got this gaping hole, and this gaping hole reminder in the side of the bleachers.
They're like, we'll rope it off. Don't worry about it.
We'll put some Phillies blankets on top of it, and you'll never know.
So city officials were like, no. But fuck you. No games can be played at this ballpark until it's thoroughly inspected and, you know, everything. So all games were canceled until inspection, and the Phillies would play at the Athletics home field. Remember, the Athletics are also in Philly at this time. Columbia Park.
Oh, Columbia.
Yeah, we'll get to Shibe in a second.
Okay.
God was clearly really mad at the Phillies because they got rained out 9 games in a row before losing their first game back on August 20th.
Damn. Well, being off for 9 games, you'd lose a step a bit.
Yeah. So they'd play 16 games at their temporary home, going 6, 9, and 1. And finishing this season they were 7th in the NL. I think there was 8 teams. The disaster would influence future stadium construction as builders began to use concrete instead of wood to form the bleachers, including in Forbes Field and Shibe Park a few years later.
All right, that makes sense.
Yeah, so this is from the opening day program at Shibe Park, which it's in Philadelphia, so it references it.
It ain't gonna fall down. It's made of concrete.
It's all there. Even the place where you walk.
Yeah.
In the
it's hard on your feet, but it's safe.
So in the construction of seating provisions of previous ballparks, the use of wood was general. Several unfortunate unfortunate accidents called serious attention to the need of something more durable than wood for the safety of the enormous crowds which thronged parts where winning baseball was being played. So that's literally from being like, welcome to Shad Park. You won't die.
A winning baseball park equals a winning team.
And in the aftermath, as you can tell, the lawsuits took its toll. Also, just like it's just generally a disaster. The Philadelphia ownership group that took over, the Potter Group, as we talked about, they would go bankrupt soon after. If you want more, go to check out the Ed's Philly Saber article on it. It goes much more into the bankruptcy of the team afterwards.
Okay.
With the disaster, no doubt, being the catalyst for that. So the stadium would be repaired and stay home to the Phillies until 1938, and in fact was the site of Babe Ruth's last major league game in 1935. The stadium would be torn down in 1950, and in case you were wondering, Edsy, the two drunks that grabbed Maggie,
I was wondering.
no one knows what happened.
They just got away, I guess.
They disappeared into
In that pandemonium,
Yeah.
they got lost and all that.
just disappeared into history.
Wow, that's a crazy story. And I'm surprised, actually, as, I consider myself someone who's, more interested than most in stadium history.
Yeah.
I was unfamiliar with that story of the Baker Bowl, so that's
Yeah.
awesome. Thanks for telling that terrible, terrible story from baseball history.
Well, you'll be. This comes out on the 9th of August, but 120 years ago today, to the day we're recording this disaster took place, and I'm gathering, and hopefully it's the deadliest day in baseball history for a long time to come.
I hope so. Forever. Yeah.
Yeah. At least our lifetimes.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Sean.
Well, until next time, make sure you follow us, give us a review, give us a like, whatever. If you know about that Phillies mascot, tell us about him. Eds, where can they find us?
They can find us on Twitter at Doing Baseball and on Instagram and TikTok at Doing.Baseball. And he's quickly mentioned, you can also find me at Eds Do Baseball on Twitter.
And I'm at Sean Do Baseball. We're here every 2 weeks. We're really excited to be sharing some baseball history with you. And until next time, I'm Sean.
And I'm Eds.
And we were bringing you the baseball.
Okay, bye.
Bye.